Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. Now today I wanted to talk about probably one of the more infamous parts of RuneScape's history, and that is merchant clans. Merchanting clans are something that I'm sure a lot of people know of, I'm sure a lot of people were a part of, and they were very prevalent right at the release of the Grand Exchange back in RuneScape 2, so kind of I think 2007. And a ton of people started using them. So today I wanted to look at if merchant clans are still around, why a lot of people are very critical of merchanting clans, why they are now against the game rules, and how they worked in general. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and let's get started. Now to begin with here, let's have a look at what merchanting clans are to begin with. And I just want to first up make a distinction between, well, something like what I have, which I guess some people would call a merchant clan, and a merchanting clan from back in 2007. Generally today, something like a merchant clan or a flipping clan is just going to be somewhere for people to congregate, give people information. There's not going to be any colluding together. We're here mainly to give out information, tips, general guides, maybe a few items that people should try, but that is pretty much it. However, back in 2007, when the Grand Exchange was coming out, the merchanting clan back then was popularized. Now essentially what they would do is they would collect a group of players and they would all buy out a very specific item. Now together between an entire clan, the purchasing power would be extremely high and the demand for that item could artificially be brought up. Now if the demand for an item gets very high and the supply stays the same, then the price of the item is going to skyrocket, and that has been done hundreds or maybe even thousands of times on varying items. Now the reason these clans were so popular is just because of how easy it was to sell the idea on other people. It seemed kind of foolproof in theory, because the merchanting clans did work on paper. If someone looked from the outside, they would see an item's price skyrocket in price over a very short period of time, and that could directly be linked to a merchant clan, so it seemed kind of like a flawless money-making idea. You just join one of these clans, get in on all the items that they are buying, and then you sell it at the peak. Now the way they would communicate the item that was to be merged and the price was through the clan chat name. For example, they would rename the clan chat name to Maple Seed, for example, if they're going to do a Maple Seed, and then they put a target amount. In this case, it was 90,000. Now, the reason that merchanting clans were even necessary is a pretty easy answer, and that is buying limits. If you've ever wondered what a buying limit is actually there for, it's pretty much there to attempt to prevent market manipulation. Now, if you're only using one account, it works pretty well. You can't go over that buying limit on a single account. Even if you're using a couple of accounts, it's not a huge deal. But that is mainly the reason why merchant clans are necessary for some things, because even if someone had the idea of, for example, hoarding Duroc plate bodies, they would only be able to buy 8 at a time or 15, and you would never be able to accumulate enough of them quickly enough to actually impact the market. Now the items that merchant clans favored in general were PVM items, but they did kind of a bit of everything. Now because they had a large purchasing power, they didn't really need to pick obscure items. Often it was stuff like barrows pieces or other kind of mid-cost items, and it had to be something that wasn't too easy to obtain. For example, U-logs or iron ore, stuff like that. It would be pretty easy for people to just go ahead and start gathering more resources to counteract the artificial increase in demand. And finally, it had to be something that regular players would actually need. Yes, you could artificially bump up the price of an item, but if nobody actually wants to buy it for that price, then it's not really going to work. Now, did merchanting clans exist before the Grand Exchange? And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure. It's possible, but they were not nearly as popular or as effective as when a global marketplace came into the game. I think the amount of effort and energy that would be required to coordinate enough people to just buy items directly from other players just would make it not really feasible or easy to do. Now, one of the most important questions here is why are merchanting clans bannable actually, and why are people extremely critical of it? Now, market manipulation isn't necessarily against the game rules even today, however, merchanting clans are. You are allowed to naturally try to manipulate the market on your own, however it's going to be very difficult, but not impossible. However, if you do it in a group, it is bannable. Now the idea behind merchant clans is not something new, it's not something unique to RuneScape, and the reason it is bannable in RuneScape is because in a lot of countries it is illegal. It is very similar to a pump and dump scheme in real life, which is considered fraud and market manipulation. So merchanting clans to begin with are fairly unethical. However, on top of the actual premise being pretty unethical, the actual clan members and the structure of the clan could do some pretty shady things as well. Now, the reason that these things are illegal in real life is really just because, well, people get screwed, and that is no different in RuneScape. Now there are so many ways for players to get screwed when they are part of a merchantine clan, and one of the biggest reasons comes down to how the clan is structured. So first up here we have a clan leader who is going to think of the item, and in most cases they're going to buy out as many as physically possible before they tell anyone else. And then next up there are high-ranking clan members which often actually pay real-life money to be in that position. They get told of the item first, so once again they're going to be stocking up on as many of that item as possible, and then finally it gets released to the public. Now because merchantine clans were very popular and they had a lot of players, right away after the item was released, the quantity would get picked up extremely quickly. So unless you were very lucky and managed to buy the item immediately, most likely you're going to be paying an extremely inflated price for the item. And in a lot of cases, the clan leader and the high-ranking players were generally just merchantine off of the lower clan members, and they are the ones who ended up losing the most amount of money. Now you know how I was mentioning earlier that they would set a price that players would start dumping the item at? Well, yeah, that generally didn't end up being true. Generally, they set the item's price way higher than was reasonable and way higher than they ever planned on waiting. And I mean, it kind of makes sense from their perspective, because if they set an accurate price at what they wanted to sell it at, then most people would try to undercut that. So by doubling it, for example, that would leave them a lot more wiggle room to sell off their own personal stocks, make a ton of money merchanting off of their lower clan members, and then there would just be an absolute bloodbath from people trying to sell off their items at a profit, break even, or even at a minor loss. For an example here, I found an image of an old merchant clan chat, and they are merching black scimitars. Now let's think about that critically for a second. Who is actually going to be buying black scimitars for a massively inflated price? To be fair, it's possible it's a quest item, but it is in no way a very useful item. Nobody is going to be paying 1,000, 2,000% more for it, and the buy and sell volume for it just cannot be that high. Like, it's just not a very useful item. However, artificially the price is going to be much higher, artificially the demand is going to be much higher, and there's no way that anyone made any money on this except for the clan leader and the high-ranking members. More than likely, it's just a big clusterfuck of people trying to merchant things to each other, and probably very few black scimitars were actually bought by regular players. Now with all of that said, some players did manage to get extremely rich from merchant clans, but they were of course the merchantine clan leader. One of the very first players to come up with this idea in RuneScape was a player by the name of Merchers. He created one of the first merchantine clans 2 days after the release of the Grand Exchange. By running this clan and being a part of other merchant clans, he was stated to have around 65 billion GP in 2008, which of course is worth a lot more than it is today in RuneScape 3. Now what exactly happened to merchantine clans, because as far as I can tell, they are not very popular or almost completely eradicated today. I think there's two main reasons behind this. For one, Jagex may have stepped up their detection process and may have just started banning all merchantine clans that they could actually find. Back in 2007, they may have been a bit more lenient. But I think the largest reason is people kind of caught on to the fact that they essentially were just giant scams. Back in 2007 to 2010, there are some big YouTubers who made videos on merchantine clans as if they were a totally legitimate way to make money. For example, if I made that video today, I would get a ton of criticism and probably a ton of hate, and honestly, rightly so. Merchant clans only really work if you have a bunch of plebeians to merch off of essentially, and if those people aren't there, then they just don't function anymore. Historically, that's the only way that black market things ever stop, when it just becomes not viable anymore. So to summarize here, no, you shouldn't join a merchantine clan. Even if you could find one, they are a giant scam, unless you are running it, of course, but in that case, you are doing something fairly unethical, so please don't. So going forward, I think it's fairly unlikely that merchant clans will make a resurgence, and I think that's probably for the best. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you found it entertaining, informational. If you have any other interesting pieces of RuneScape history you'd like me to make a video on, let me know with a comment down below. Now speaking of merchant clans, if you want to go ahead and join my clan chat, it is in the description. It is FlippingOSRS. No, we're not doing group merches, of course. Just a good place to hang out, chill in, or better yet, join my Discord, which again will be in the description. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.